Dear friends, comrades, and colleagues, thank you very much for joining us today. We're gathered to celebrate the 75th anniversary of prominent left philosopher and cultural theorist Slavoj Žižek, whose work inspires us with his solidarity and fidelity to critical analysis. Professor Žižek is an example of an intellectual who simultaneously shies away from being captured by mainstream and simplistic theories, yet sets the tone for public debate, sharp and crushing. He describes himself as a moderate conservative communist, which has to do with the originality and unpredictability of his positions. He is usually represented as one of the most important left theorists, but we would like to note here that it will be obviously wrong to reduce the diversity of our heterogeneous and even in some way fragmented community to one voice, albeit such an impressive one. Professor Žižek is, for us, is the big and significant other whose voice we hear and accept, reject, or criticize, recognizing its significance for our own intellectual and political endeavors. My name is Marina. I'm one of the organizers of the Post-Marxist Studies, scientific and educational project. Our initiative is a group of young post-Soviet intellectuals and students engaged in education of contemporary critical theory. If you wish to support our work, you can help us by donating. All the necessary links will appear in the chat. My colleague will provide them. So, Professor Žižek, the floor is yours, so please.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here because although, as everybody knows, I am critical of the existing regime in Russia, I think it is catastrophic to pursue this policy of reading the conflict going on now as the conflict between Asiatic and European, more democratic culture. We should never forget that, Western Europe, human rights, but precisely Western Europe also produced Hitler and so on and so on. My only critical point is I cannot avoid not dirty, don't be afraid, obscenities. Why did you use this horrible term, significant other? You know what means with us? There is a problem in today's politically correct times. If you have a partner, sexual and so on, how do you name him? You know, if you are old, my girlfriend, boyfriend, it's ridiculous. Then lover, it's too obscene and so on. So the political correct term is significant other, you know. And that's my problem just with that term. But let me answer why I like your entire approach. In what sense are we today post-Marxist? I think that the situation itself is post-Marxist in a very precise sense. Yes, Marx still provides, I think, the most efficient, practical theory of what goes on today in our epoch of global capitalism. If anything, Marx is more relevant than ever today. However, post-Marxism means a couple of things to me. Post-Marxism means precisely to be Marxist today. We should analyze our situation in how it differs from what Marx was describing. First, I don't know if you invited him, by him I mean Yanis Varoufakis, but although I often agree with him, I sometimes also am critical. Nonetheless, he introduced the term, as you probably know, techno-feudalism. This is a problematic term, but for me, but it indicates a big change in contemporary capitalism. I think it is that with these new mega corporations, like, I don't know, Amazon, Google, and so on, we are no longer at the level of even mega strong capitalist organizations. These organizations effectively act as old feudal institutions. They control an entire strata of our society, and in some sense, they exploit not only workers, but also small capitalists even. For example, Amazon. If you want to sell books in the West today, even if you are a capitalist producer, you have to go through Amazon. So they are no longer capitalists winning in a competition and so on. So as maybe Varoufakis goes too far when he says capitalism is over. But it's certainly that the nature of capitalism is changing radically. The second feature, for Marx, it was still clear that there was one predominant historical subject which embodies emancipation. The idea is that the emancipatory potential is inscribed into the very social existence of this age. And for Marx, this was, of course, working class. Today, I think the situation is much more complex in the sense that, first, who is working class? In some countries, even in my own unimportant country, Slovenia, there are almost more precarious workers who are not proletarians in a classical sense. They usually own their own means of production, computer or whatever. So you can treat them even as small capitalists, but they are in some sense even more exploited. Not to mention the vast topic of who is exploited today. Look, for Marx, the source of value is exclusively Arbeitskraft, the working force. Okay, but then if you apply this automatically, then you can say that Venezuela, before its collapse, when it was still exporting money, Venezuela was exploiting United States. Why? Because they were just selling their national resources. So we have to include into exploitation, let's call it ecological exploitation, you know, ruining even if you profit from it, ruining your environment, your life world, also should count as exploitation. Then a step further here. What about the more and more important invisible work? Invisible in the sense that it doesn't exist in the eyes of the official market. My good friend, one of the few leftists who didn't screw up when they took over, vice president of Bolivia in the time of Evo Morales, Alvaro Garcia Linera, he pointed out that as long as they focused exclusively on the working class, it didn't work. But then they discovered that an incredibly large amount of work was done outside formal market, like you hire native women who do all the dirty work at home, cleaning, cooking, taking care of the elder and so on. And, you know, they didn't exist formally as proletarians. So again, you must know that from the end of the 19th century, Marxists are looking for a new revolutionary subject. When the classical working class didn't work. So first it was the idea that it's the third world people, then it was the idea in 68 students, whatever you want. Then today, some people claim that the immigrants are like pure proletarians. They have nothing, they just come and so on. I don't think this works. I think we today have multiple potential forces which may resist. And the danger I see here is to reduce one to the other. For example, maybe many of you know this. It made me so sad when I discovered, probably you followed this news, that in Uganda, half a year ago, the parliament almost unanimously voted the law, which is the toughest law in the world against homosexuality. If you are caught in a homosexual act, it's either death penalty or prison till you die in prison. And the reason they gave is that for them, LGBT, homosexuality, and so on is something that emerged in the developed West, and that if you export these gay rights to Uganda, you are basically spreading imperialism and ruining the local culture. So you see, this is for me a real problem. On the one hand, yes, often we in the West are arrogant, as is we own the definition of what human rights are, we just have to export it. But on the other hand, isn't it unfair then to say to women and gays in Uganda, sorry, anti-imperialist struggle is more important, so wait a little bit with your problem, now the main thing is anti-colonial struggle. I see so many problems here. The next thing, don't be afraid, I will soon conclude, is I've written a short text on it. The idea came to me, Haiti. You know what is going on now in Haiti? It's the first example 2-3 weeks ago that the criminal gangs basically took over. They control 80% of the country and of the capital city. The state is just one of the minor players. Then I expanded this analysis and went on. But it's not only Haiti, and it's even not only the third so-called less developed countries like Ecuador or Mexico. Let's go to Israel. Aren't the West Bank settlers also illegal gangs which are tolerated by the state to achieve its goals without openly admitting it, no? And okay, I will not mention other examples, like I don't know enough about it, but what comes to my mind is the Wagner Group, which was also in Russia some kind of private army. Now, let's make a step further here, not just attack the usual guys. What about Israel today? Aren't the West Bank settlers also an illegal, violent gang which is doing the dirty job for the government? And the government sometimes even condemns them marginally. They say, we will look into it, but they do nothing. Now let's go to the top, United States. We have Proud Boys and many of those groups which are formally designated as terrorist organizations. But nonetheless, Donald Trump relies on them, doesn't fully support them, but manipulates them, uses them. And I'm here a mega pessimist. So you see, not only in poor countries, even in the big countries, it is as if the present government cannot any longer maintain its power without relying on illegal terrorist force. It's a very sad conclusion. And the last thing, if you know this mega science fiction novel by 16 Liu, The Three-Body Problem, this idea of if around the planet there are 3 suns which move chaotically, it's chaos. You cannot predict the future. Aren't we approaching this? Because although I think that in the background of our crisis, there is still global capitalist dynamic, but we have 5, 6 crises. We have the threat of war. We have ecological crisis. We have crisis with who will control artificial intelligence. We have the immigration crisis and so on. And what I fear is the chaos that occurs in the interaction of this crisis. You know, like sometimes maybe we can confront one crisis by at least limiting the other crisis. Like if there will be a mega ecological catastrophe, maybe, let's hope, people will say sorry. When all our lives are threatened, wars become meaningless. You know, we need collaboration, but it's also the opposite solution. I remember in many wars today, people say, yeah, ecology, but nonetheless, we are now in a war, we have to fight for our lives, so forget ecology. So this is the next thing that worries me very much. The last thing is the incredible power of ideology. I think that Marx was here much more intelligent than it may appear. What he called commodity fetishism is a kind of ideological structure. Marx uses even term theology, but it's part of our daily economic activity. And I think this is an extremely important lesson today. Ideology is not what is taught at universities or in theory. What interests me is how ideology structures our daily lives with all the versions that this implies. For example, I think that one of the aspects today is what I call cynical ideology. It means we are aware of the problems. We talk all the time about the right problems, but we talk in such a way that we can be sure that nothing will be really done. Look, for 15 years at least, we know ecology is a big threat. There is one resolution after the other and so on, but nothing happens. So to conclude, my idea is that the only way to have some hope today is to say, paradoxically, there is no future for us. But I introduce here, maybe some of those who listen to me are aware of this, a very nice distinction which is present in Slovene and in French. I don't know how it is in your other languages, between futur and avenir. Future is whatever will come later, even if it's the same as now. Avenir is avenir, to come, something new. So the first step to a radical change is pessimism. Pessimism means no future, which means we cannot go on the way things go on now, just with small aesthetic changes and so on. We need, maybe only through big catastrophes this will happen. That's why I'm a communist. It doesn't mean Politburo and KGB are back. It means we should be aware that we are approaching a new era to which we should prepare now, a new era of globalized emergency state. Maybe I've spoken enough. With this, I finish. Now I open to what in good old times they called communist self-criticism, helped by the criticism of others. So please.
Dear Professor Zuzek, thank you very much for your talk. So now we can move on to discussion and questions. So once again, dear friends, I repeat this. If you have any questions, please raise a hand and I will pass the word to you, or you can write it down in the chat and I will read it out loud or some.
Please, because I have problems. I forgot my glasses with
reading. Okay. Yeah. I will read it. Please don't worry.
If I hear it directly.
I will read it in case they were read.
Passively, I just hope for my Russian friends one thing. You don't remember it, you are too young, but when I was young, there were popular short cartoons, animated movies on a rabbit, Zayat, who tries to be cunning, and at the end, there is some surprise, he was defeated, and the final line was always that this Zayat, the rabbit, says something like, "Nu pagadi," like, oh my God, what's happened? So I want this type of questions, that I will not be able just to include my machine, but to say, "Nu pagadi." which means, yes, you caught me. Thank you.
Okay, so great. You're gonna ask or write your questions in English or Russian. I will help with the translation in the last
If I
case.
will need translation,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do passively
Okay.
understand Russian, very passively, because you know why? That's my worst conformism. When I was in high school, more than half a century ago, it was the Cold War. So in high school, we had English and another language, and I've chosen Russian because I said one side will probably win the Cold War, so it's better to know English and Russian so that whoever wins, I will speak their language also.
This was a very nice choice. So I will repeat once again this in Russian in case that our colleagues didn't understand me. So, дорогие друзья, коллеги, пожалуйста, сейчас время вопросов. Я уже вижу, что они появляются в чате. Я начну их зачитывать. Если вы хотите сами задать вопрос, вы можете поднять руку, я передам вам слово, и вы сможете его озвучить на русском или на английском. В крайнем случае, я помогу вам с переводом. Да, давайте тогда сперва я прочту вопрос в чате, который был, а потом передам слово как раз Антону. So there is one question in the chat. Alisher is asking, if we are waiting for a catastrophe, which crisis do you think is the most preferable, if we can say this?
Professor, this is such a risky thing because from our, I will try not to talk too much. You know, there was a joke in Slovenia. How do you make 1 hour interview with me? You ask me one question, you know. I will try to be correct. From our social life, the best thing would be an ecological catastrophe because this is a chance to unite us, you know. But it's also unpredictable, you know, unpredictable in the sense that first, it can be a real catastrophe, like, I don't know, making large part of the land uninhabitable. And second thing, we cannot even guarantee that the ecological crisis will work towards a greater solidarity. What if those countries which will be less affected will simply try to isolate themselves? What I fear is, for example, ecological crisis combined with new forms of digital control. Now they say you can avoid borders. I mean, you can penetrate through borders, blah, blah. But with new modes of social control, maybe it will be possible for a country to isolate itself fully. So I am here more of a relativist. Relativist not in the stupid sense of who knows, but in the sense of simply we cannot say which crisis is, under quotation mark, the best. Because now many people think peace, the threat of war. But you know, all sides in the ongoing wars agree that peace in itself is also an ambiguous category. I always say this, and this is addressed at all sides, that you know that when you have an occupier, the occupiers always want peace, because peace means they can, peacefully exploit what they occupied. So that even peace shouldn't be an absolute value. I think we should really here be Leninist. I'm here referring only to that famous phrase, concrete analysis of a concrete situation.
That's great. Thank you. So, Anton.
It's not the greatest thought of all time. Don't exaggerate.
Please don't be shy. Anton, I can pass a word to you. Could you please ask your question? Anton?
Anton Yutkin. Did I read it correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, probably Anton has several technical issues, so please, Anton, let me know.
Okay,
I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can. You can write down your question if you have some technical issues. Unfortunately, I can't. So we have one other question from Stavtsev Dmitry, please.
I see you, yes.
Hello, I have maybe a big question. Is it possible in the current situation with the acceptance of general pessimism to develop some kind of revolutionary ideology, methodology, at least in order like Hegel to discover a new form of being? Or are we in such a torn time, as Jacques Derrida tells us in Ghost of Marx, at the end of time, that some kind of struggle in the traditional dialectic of slave and master does not work, and so far only we can only raise the anxiety in order to achieve some kind of self-awareness.
I agree with you. It's a very tough, deep question. The proper answer would have been another, not 2 hours, but 3 hours lesson. You know what I would say? First, I think that today, more than ever, we should follow, although I don't follow them theoretically, the motto of one of the founders of Frankfurt School, Max Horkheimer, who proposed already in the late 30s this motto: pessimism in theory, optimism in practice. That is to say, don't make any big plans. That's why I ironically call myself a moderately conservative communist. Radical changes will be necessary, but more than ever today, the lesson to learn from Hegel is how even the best project can go wrong. Hegel is not a stupid optimist. The whole of Hegel's philosophy, especially phenomenology, is this: you have one nice idea, when it is actualized, it turns into a nightmare. And I think 19th century and later would be a paradise for Hegel. Like, you know that in the second half of 19th century, it was a kind of with some small wars, but mostly not in Europe, all European progress, healthcare, retirement, women's rights. Then it was the Great War, the First World War. Why? How was it possible that after that golden era of gradual project, you have World War? October Revolution, I still am not ready to dismiss it. It was a moment of emancipation, but 10, 15 years later, you know whom we got, no? Stalin and so on. So my approach would be this one, that first, let's keep all options open. Let's improvise, engage wherever you can. Just avoid the old Marxist trap that you ask of some of those suffering exploited to suffer, to continue suffering because their struggle is not essential, you know. Like the classical Marxist example was to tell to women, wait for socialism, it will be automatically resolved. This. So I'm here very pragmatic. There are cases where you need armed resistance. There are cases where mass mobilizations succeed. Although in Greece, you probably remember, Syriza failed. But it was a total miracle of a new radical political party emerging from civil society, different organizations there. The ideal happened. But the problem I see here is, many people pointed this out correctly, even some intelligent conservatives, is that I'm speaking now about especially United States and many other so-called developed countries, that what was once the prerogative of the radical left, popular rebellion, people on the street, attack government buildings, now is becoming the prerogative of the new populist right. You remember 6th of January, 3 years ago, when Trump lost election and at the organization, people, the crowd, invaded Capitol in Washington, the seat of power, many of my friends cried. They said, wait a minute, we should be doing this, leftists. No, it's over. So I am such an opportunist here, but in a good sense, that I would even say that since today, the new right is obscene, subversive, vulgar, and so on, the left should not forget to address so-called normal, decent people and tell them, sorry, we are not just chaotic leftists. We understand your daily troubles. I think one of the lessons today is, on behalf of some radical visions, don't despise ordinary people. Don't say, oh, these are your egotist interests. Ordinary people have the right to care about, okay, you talk about big revolution, how will I survive tomorrow, and so on and so on. So I except for me, obvious fact that a new forum of global coordination will be needed. Because look at northern Russia, northern Canada, not just northern. What strange weather changes are there? You know, in Norilsk and those northern Siberia parts, now in summer temperatures get over 35 degrees. At some point 2 years ago, do you remember, in summer, Seattle and Vancouver, Canada, reached for a couple of days 50 degrees Celsius. Why am I mentioning this? You cannot say, oh, this is your problem. No, this is just a local effect of a global disturbance of how the air circulates around the northern pole. Collective actions, collective cooperations are needed. The problem is who can do it today. And again, my idea is here, in practice, try whatever you can do. Democratic struggle, but I do not exclude limited violence. You know why? People who advocate just peaceful means like to say, look at South Africa, look at black struggle in the United States, Mandela, Martin Luther King. In both cases, some kind of temporary peace resolution was achieved by civil negotiations. Yeah, but everybody knows that those in power accepted these negotiations because they were aware that behind them there was a threat of real violence. Like in the United States, it wasn't just Martin Luther King. There were other more violent groups threatening. The same was with African National Congress. So this will be maybe a very pessimist view, what I'm telling you, but I would say we should just be aware what our general goal is. But in practice, we should be absolute opportunists in the sense that don't be afraid to engage whatever happens here, there, and so on. I don't have one model.
Thank you very much. We will proceed with one question in chat, and then I will transfer a word to Anton, who failed to ask it earlier. So one question from the chat from Daria. It's written in Russian. I will read it out loud. So, Professor Zizek, how do you think, is greater protest activity in European countries associated with their well-being due to the exploitation of third world countries, where we can say that there is almost no protest activity and most often there is an authoritarian regime? How do you think? And one further question, which is related in some way to this one, what should Russian Marxists focus their efforts and endeavors on today? So please, could you answer this?
The second question, I really don't know enough about Russia. It's so difficult to pass so except to express, I signed the petition to solidarity to the movement of those who support the demand for Boris Kagarlitsky to be left, to be set free. And I say this honestly, because I remember 2-3 years ago, Kagarlitsky wrote a violent attack on me. But I still have a high appreciation of him. Now, again, I don't have time. I will have to go soon to answer fully the question, but I think the beginning of the question is excellent, because I ask myself a simple question. It's very important what to say, that remember this big, under quotation marks, I don't believe in it, revolutionary movement in United States and Europe, the great 60s and early 70s, Paris, 68, student protests, hippies in America. But do you know that if you look at social economic situation, this was the highest point of the welfare state. Already from late 70s, there was a potential crisis of capitalism, living standard was falling down. So isn't this an ironic fact that you still see me?
Yeah, it's okay. Please
Yeah,
proceed.
okay, yeah, sorry. No, isn't this a very sad, ironic fact that you had biggest protests in the last decades, or at least after 45, when the majority lived relatively well, there was really a well-functioning welfare state, and so on and so on. So the very sad conclusion of it is, and some dictators are aware of it. I know that in Albania, Enver Hoxha said this. I know that the previous one, not the recent leader, Kim Il-sung, the middle one, said this once, decades ago, to a Western leader. You should not allow people to live too well. People who revolt are when they live too well. When they live better, they want then more, you know. If you keep the standard low, you will not get a rebellion. It's a very sad conclusion. Even, let me mention another paradox. A black friend of mine did an analysis. They asked in African countries, which is their highest value socially. They got the answer, wealth, money, to get rich, in an illegal or legal way. They made the same big opinion poll in Western Europe. It was equality. So you see, equality, you can afford to be for equality when you live well enough. When you are really poor and desperate, you just want money to live a little bit better. You don't care about equality. So again, I'm sorry, this is not an answer. I just confused more the situation. But unfortunately, that's the situation, I think.
So thank you. Now I pass the word to Anton. Please, can you ask your question?
Finally. I see you.
Yeah, that's great.
But finally.
Yeah. Hi.
So please.
Hi. I want to ask a very dull metaphysical question, because before and after this political debate and this question about Schelling, most of all, you write in all of your books, you criticize left Schellingian position and even Marx, and you are talking about necessity to return to Hegel and Hegelian reinterpretation of Marx. But from my viewpoint, your Hegelianism in its core Schellingian. So you wrote a great book about Schelling in middle of 90s. So my question is, can I describe your position as left Schellingian? Left Schellingianism? Your dialectical materialism.
I'm not afraid to say this. You know, if you somehow, through organizers, give me your mail, I now put together a text, a longer text, where I deal with all this in a critical reading of a new book by Robert Pippin, and I go into all of this because my position is that there is a Schellingian element in Hegel himself, in all those. Schelling, for me, is the philosopher who tried to break out of this logical thought. You know, it's a wonderful beginning of Schelling, you must know it, in his Weltalter fragment, where he said, okay, at the beginning was Logos. What interests me is what was there before the beginning, you know. And I think that Hegel is not so simple here. For example, you know where I find this Schellingian Hegel? You know how it went at the beginning of his third part of the Encyclopedia, Philosophy of Spirit, when Hegel, basically, to put it in vulgar terms, raises the question of how do we pass from
madness,
animals to humanity, his answer is madness.
Yeah, of course.
And he doesn't just say, once we are humans, oh, forget madness. He said, madness remains here all the time as a background. Our reason develops, reason in Hegelian sense, Vernunft, develops as an effort to contain the everlasting threat of madness. So please, this is not a formality. Now we don't have time, but tell the organizer to let me know your email.
I think I have your email.
Sorry?
I think I have your email and I write it.
It's szizek@yahoo.com.
Yeah.
You send me my email just with you get that 40 pages text where I go in detail into all of this. Listen, don't kill me. I have family obligations, so where is the boss? I don't see the boss.
You're talking about me, probably.
There must be a boss. You know, Lenin said, democracy, yes, but anarchy, no. You know how I cynically read this? Democracy, yes, if you know who is the boss. Really.
Okay, I will be the boss.
Just one more. If not, my wife will kill me. I have to be there. Please, let's conclude. And then we can repeat this if you do another of these and so on. But I can also do something else. If you, the boss, if you send me the address, but I have an address, right? No, I can send you some of my new text.
Oh, that will be great.
Original.
We will appreciate this. Yeah.
Yeah. So please, the last one, then I have to kill myself. Sorry.
So okay, there was one funny question, I can say. So, what can you tell to those who are saying that Slavoj Žižek, that you are yourself is like a meme? How do you think? Does it in some way mitigates your work, or in some way it's like strengthens your position as an unpredictable philosopher?
Stalinist fanatic. I know I'm partially guilty of this status because of my obscene jokes and so on, but I think that this is the way to attack me, to diminish me. You know, many people say, oh, go to his talk, he's funny, he tells dirty jokes. Just don't take too seriously what he is saying, you know. But this will sound pathetic, what I will say now, but that's why I liked so much Anton's question about Schelling, no? I am bored by my short political writings. I do them as an ersatz. I just wonder what I write in political comment seems to me more or less so obvious that my problem is how is it that others do not say all this, while my true heart is with pure philosophy. The books that count is the one that you mentioned, Indivisible Absolute, then the big fat one on Hegel, Less Than Nothing, and maybe my new one, Christian atheism. My heart is more and more there.